on this edition of Southern Newsweek. Southern nurses join colleagues across New Zealand for an 8-hour strike. A Central Otago artist received the highest accolade in the Queen's Birthday Honours. And more than 30 international ambassadors visited Dunedin recently. Kia ora, I'm Melissa Barton. Nurses and associated healthcare workers took part in an 8-hour strike around New Zealand, with marches in many cities. Across the south, many thousands took to the streets, which included Queenstown, Dunedin and Invercargill.
New Zealand Nurses Organisation members walked off the job at 11 a.m. after talks to settle their collective wage agreement collapsed. NZNO Nationwide Industrial Services Coordinator Glenda Alexander says many thousands of people took to the streets across the nation.
Oh look, it's just the same, it's massive everywhere. You know, obviously the bigger cities, more people. Smaller cities, there's still a big presence out there, a wave of purple across the country.
Nurses and associated workers are after a 17% pay rise, but Alexander says their working conditions are every bit as important, if not more so. Two frontline healthcare assistants at Dunedin Public Hospital say assaults on staff have increased in recent years, and it's partially due to understaffing.
Patient safety, staff safety are the two big issues, to be honest with you. And working overseas is a huge draw card for an awful lot of people.
Because it's just diabolical, you know. A lot needs to change. It's not just about the money, it's about safer staffing and this many people putting their hands up to say, you know, help us out, listen to us.
Career ED nurse Anne Daniels is very direct when she describes having to make decisions about who gets treated in the emergency department and who doesn't.
We can't give them the care that they deserve. We're always deciding who misses out. Do you know how that feels? It feels like shit.
DPH Ward 7 nurse and songwriter Jack Ringhand took on the task of composing a protest song for the event.
There's power, worker power in the union. It was the first time that I played it in public. The response seemed great.
At Invercargill, between 50 and 100 people marched in support of nurses. Southland Hospital clinical nurse specialist Charlene Waddell and NZNO organiser Colette Wright say staff are at the end of their rope.
And the nurses on the floor are really wondering where their backup, where their supports are going to come from, because the problem's already pretty huge.
And also retention and increasing for our staff, so ensuring for our new students coming through that we want to retain our students instead of losing them to Australia.
While over in Queenstown, around 25 people marched from Lakes District Hospital to the busy Franklin roundabout about noon. 15-year career nurse Jeanette Anderson says she's not had a pay rise for about 4 years.
And all we want is fair pay and safe staffing so that we can do our job.
It's estimated around 30,000 people took part in protests nationwide. The South Today.
Overseas dignitaries representing more than 30 countries have taken a 2-day tour of Dunedin recently. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs trip is intended to help ambassadors make business connections in the South.
Ambassadors and High Commissioners from 31 different countries visited the Otago marae as part of their 2-day study tour of Dunedin's economy. Minister of Foreign Affairs Protocol Advisor Fiona Fowler says the tour gives the dignitaries a chance to learn how we do things and also a look at potential opportunities for international business.
I think it's very important for them to see different parts of our country, different ways we do things, but also the different business opportunities.
Fijian High Commissioner Philemoni Wangabaga says getting insights into how to deal with Fiji's beleaguered tourism industry is important to him.
As you may be aware that our nations in the Pacific have been ravaged during this COVID, and there's need for some innovative thinking, business thinking. We hope that we would get some takebacks from visiting these places, which also includes some startup businesses and technology businesses, agriculture sectors. So we hope that some new ideas that we can gain from visiting these institutions.
Fowler says the country's closed borders has meant that diplomats are more available than usual to tour New Zealand.
We try and do a study tour once a year and take the diplomatic corps to different regions of the country and showcase different businesses. At the moment, because of COVID, we're trying to do it twice a year because we kind of have a captive audience at the moment.
Today, the group was to meet up with various local businesses at the Otago Business School. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Otago's Graham Sydney has been named in this year's Queen's Birthday Honours list. He says his honour comes from the growing maturity of New Zealanders as a people and as a nation.
Taking in his inspiring view, Otago's Sir Graham Sydney surveys the landscape he's famous for painting. He says he's fortunate to have received the highest Queen's Birthday honour for capturing his surroundings on canvas.
For me, it means that it's a recognition of how much affection some people hold for Central Otago, and I'm one of those fortunate people who have, by sheer chance, not by deliberate campaign or policy, happened to have spent my time trying to put into a permanent form what I love about this place, and it seems to have mattered to other people too.
Sir Graham says in his case, much of the support he receives comes from family, friends and associates who've made it possible for him to pursue this strange hobby, as he calls it.
This is just a recognition that places like this matter, and that people who do a job like me, helping build our culture and bring attention to things through artwork in whatever form it takes. That's how a nation identifies itself eventually, and that matters too.
His 5-decade career spans a few different types of media, including oil painting, watercolour, egg tempera, lithographs, etching and photography. Sir Graham says he's lived south of the Waitaki River for most of his life, and is grateful the scenes he's well known for painting are literally at his doorstep.
Every day I wake up to this sort of magnificence, and it's a wonderful theatre. It's a daily theatre. The show changes every hour.
Sir Graham has advocated on various environmental issues, including the successful Save Central campaign, and he was a founding member of the Central Otago Wilding Conifer Control Group. Sir Graham was made an officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit at New Year's in 2004. In Central Otago, the South Today.
A large lakefront development has received a seal of approval after local politicians were given a tour of the site. The new build is set to link downtown Wanaka with its marina.
Wanaka ward councillors and community board staff got a tour of the council's redevelopment of the lakefront. The project will link downtown Wanaka with the nearby marina, so both locals and out-of-town visitors can enjoy the scenery. Wanaka Ward Councillor Quentin Smith says the project is going well.
I think it's looking great. I think the community, once this is completed, will get a real sense of a great project being delivered, and I think it'll be really hard to imagine what it used to look like once it's finished.
The development features a lakeside boardwalk plus a shared pathway higher up on the shore, which project manager Daniel Williams says will make the area much more accessible for both walkers and cyclists.
It upgrades a footpath that was originally 1 metre wide to, I think in its narrowest form now is 2.5, and it goes up to 4.2 metres wide in places, so it really is like an expressway it's really purpose built for having cyclists and pedestrians, really come together in this one space.
He says one of the biggest headaches for the development has been the fluctuating level of Lake Wanaka.
This one has been particularly challenging because it revolves around lake levels, and of course, so if we have heavy rains, the lake level comes up, and it has an impact on that way. So the working environment here, where lake levels come up, and it basically prevents you from working on certain aspects of the project, not all, but yeah, certainly on the boardwalk, it certainly has its challenges, yes.
Williams says the project is designed to be environmentally conscious. with noisy piling timed to avoid the breeding season of native grebes that nest along the lake, and making sure that sawdust from building the boardwalk is taken away rather than just let fall into the lake.
It's one of the most prestigious locations that I've worked. Worked quite a lot on, in central city Christchurch, around the Avon and things, and I'm well aware of just how damaging construction can be to certain areas. So it was really at the forefront of our thinking was, how we can prevent this construction really affecting the environment.
Williams says so far the project is on target for being finished by the end of August. The South Today.
Still to come on this edition of Southern Newsweek, a 40-year-old motorcycling tradition is set to put its kickstand down for good, and Queenstown has been illuminated at the annual Festival of Lights. So catch this and more after the break. Welcome back. Organisers say a record-breaking number of motorcyclists took part in the 40th and final Brass Monkey Motorcycle Rally. It's estimated up to 45,000 people attended the event.
Motorcyclists gathering for the last time at the annual Brass Monkey Rally. Organisers believe more than 4,000 people turned up to the event.
And that's the biggest that we've ever had in 40 years. But it's the same old thing when you tell people that it's the last of something. They'll make the effort to come, and with COVID last year people didn't go anywhere. People have bought new motorbikes and they spent their money in New Zealand, travelling around New Zealand, and that's what people have been telling us as well.
The regular ride takes its name from the historically low temperatures at the regular meeting place. Spokesman John Williams says despite the unseasonably warm temperatures, bikers came well prepared from across New Zealand.
Just experience, being here, catching up with friends they haven't seen, in this case, for 2 years, and that's why this is such an event as well. People are coming with backup vehicles, bringing all their gear and barbecues and tents and stuff and that, So you think, just make it work, we'll let you go with it.
With it being the last event of its kind for riders, there were many tall tales told of the journeys to the Ida Valley, many riders taking days to travel there, and they also shared stories from the rallies of old. And Williams says that's what it's all about.
So I actually asked quite a few people yesterday and today, why do you keep coming back here? And they said, look around. What's there not to like about here? The roads are great. And they said, you guys, the organisers, are great, you're friendly, try and make things work. You can't satisfy everybody, try and satisfy most of the people here.
With this being the last of its kind, there are rumours flying around of another event set to take its place, possibly at a different time of the year. In central Otago, the South Today.
The public came out in droves to enjoy this year's Light Festival in Queenstown recently. What started off as a small event in 2016 has grown into a massive undertaking, with more than 50,000 visitors attending the 4-night festival.
After being away last year due to COVID-19, the Luma Southern Light project illuminated the Queenstown Gardens again with all manner of spectacular and inventive light displays over the long weekend.
We have everything from the largest origami boat in the southern hemisphere to gardens of mushrooms to performance to elves and pixies. We've got roaming fairies back again, and we've got everything. We've even got a place to worship.
For the first time, visitors aged over 12 were charged a $5 entry fee, but organiser Duncan Forsyth still expected more than 50,000 people to attend the immersive experience.
Easily the best arts festival in New Zealand, Southern Hemisphere, great place for the family, great place for you to get lost in, forget about all the last couple of years, immerse yourself in it, a sensory experience.
A free bus service operated from Frankton to help visitors attend the event without parking issues. In Queenstown, the South Today.
Intermediate age pupils from several Dunedin schools converged on Te Huna Normal Intermediate School to take part in a technology event. The EPRO 8 Challenge has teams of children working together to build projects from the ground up, with the winning team set to compete at the national finals.
Eternal glory, or at least bragging rights, are on the line for these budding engineers taking part in the Dunedin leg of the EPRO 8 Challenge.
So the grand final champion's a trophy this size. With we claim it's the world's only trophy that comes complete with working gearbox.
Kelvin Thiel set up the EPRO Challenge 4 years ago in the North Island and was able to quit his day job when running these events around Aotearoa became a full-time career. Thiel says he designed each of the projects to be visual and dynamic.
Initially we 3D printed all the equipment, so aluminium rod and 3D printed joiners and parts. But what it's been really cool with that is it's meant that when we come up with new ideas of activities and challenges, we're not limited by what's available. We can add parts to it. So we could add a gearbox, we can add a solar panel, we can add a generator.
The Grants Braes Engineering Ducks team worked together as a unit well on the painting robot project. Team spokesperson 10-year-old Austin Heggie outlines the challenge they just completed.
We've built a contraption with a paintbrush where it has to go up and down to paint a wall. So first of all we did it with an axle and we had to move the axle for the paintbrush to go up and down, and then we had to step it up for another 40 points to use motors to make it go slower and press 2 buttons to make it go up and down again.
The Ducks are one of 2 teams Grants Braes has in the event, and their teacher Rebecca McKeever is super proud of both teams.
But also all this STEAM, engineering, problem solving, maths. They even had to do a wee piece of art just then, so really all curriculum areas are covered.
To get to this stage of the event, pupils around Otipoti met the grade after taking part in video challenges at their own schools. They are then called to take part in the semi-finals, and after today, the top teams go on to regionals. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Still to come on this edition of Southern Newsweek, an Auckland-based former Dunedin artist returns with an intriguing installation, and a giant skateboard rolls into Invercargill on a nationwide tour. So see you after the break. Welcome back. An Auckland-based former Dunedin artist has come south, bringing in installation work to the Dunedin Public Art Gallery. Steve Carr is bringing an environmentally aware installation down south, working with a local florist.
Artist Steve Carr and a team from Dunedin's Estelle Flowers are putting together the Dunedin version of Carr's work In Bloom, which has been installed around New Zealand in different forms.
From the residency, this work got shown at in Britomart during the summer season, and then the work travelled to Christchurch Art Gallery for autumn, and now it's here for the winter season at the Dunedin Public Art Gallery.
Carr was one of the founders of the Blue Oyster Art Gallery in Dunedin a couple of decades ago, before leaving to work on his masters in Auckland. He says the main body of the work may look like ordinary car tyres, but he says they're definitely not.
There's a chance that people walk by and just assume that it's rubber tyres with plantings in it, and I quite like that part. I like that some people will discover it and some people may not, and I think when the plantings are in it, that kind of slippage happens even more because you're drawn to the plantings, and we're used to seeing tyres with plantings in it, and so this feels like an extravagant kind of embellishment of that.
In Bloom is different in each centre, reflecting the different seasons and local environment. As Dunedin slides into winter, the recyclable or natural part of the work has been supplied by Estelle Flowers. Jolene Wilkinson is pleased to be collaborating with Steve Carr.
He gives us free rein. He's amazing actually, because he's the artist, but he's quite happy for us to do our thing.
Wilkinson says in a juxtaposition to the non-biodegradable nature of the tyre sculpture, all of the plant matter is environmentally friendly.
So with the exception of the Spanish moss, which is fully sustainable, but it has come from Auckland because it is a epiphyte, so it grows off other things. We don't have that kind of tropical thing in Dunedin as far as I'm aware. So other than that, everything else is sourced from our very local environment, Dunedin, our home gardens, local contacts.
She says all of the floral components of the work will be composted at the end of the installation. In Bloom is on display on the mezzanine of the Dunedin Public Art Gallery. In Dunedin, the South Today.
A giant skateboard touring the country trundled in for a visit to a school in Invercargill recently. Pupils of Sacred Heart School were invited to climb underneath and on top of the huge 12-metre long board, which is promoting the upcoming Olympic Games.
What is possibly the world's biggest fully functional skateboard rolled into Invercargill as part of a nationwide promotional tour celebrating the addition of skateboarding to this year's Olympic Games.
It's great that it's finally been recognised as an actual sport and a technical sport at that.
Two of the country's top skateboarders, Matthew Markland and Bowman Hansen, invited children from Sacred Heart School for a close-up inspection of the 12-metre long board, with Hansen saying the sport can open doors around the world.
I've made a lot of lifetime friends through it and experienced things that I never would have without it.
And pupils were able to get their own skateboards personally autographed by the visiting athletes.
My skateboard, the skaters signed it and they wrote stuff and everything.
Tour organiser James Delaney says skateboarding is one way of getting youngsters out of the house and physically active.
I think it's really an important message to say that the Olympics is an amazing thing, sports is an amazing thing. Trying to get kids involved in this day is extremely good, you know, when we're challenged with that of technology, but I think this showcases that there's still a love and interest for it.
Other new sports added to this year's Olympics are surfing, sport climbing, karate, baseball and softball. In Invercargill, the South Today.
A Dunedin woman has allowed her bedroom to be taken over by hundreds of candy dispensers. Called Pez Dispensers, her collection consists of cartoon and celebrity characters mounted on a lolly dispenser.
A collection of perky and playful Pez dispensers is turning into a mini museum. Blossom O'Neill began collecting the candy receptacles with a set of characters from the movie Madagascar.
They had a Madagascar set and I liked giraffes. And I remember having the giraffe as the childhood little dispenser. So I wanted to complete the whole collection. And once I got to that, the guy that I had bought it off online actually sent me like another 20 on top of that. So then I was like, oh, this is quite cool. So I just kept gradually collecting them.
The collection is now gradually expanding across the walls of her bedroom.
So a Pez dispenser is little lolly dispensers that you could buy at the dairy for about 50 cents. And now they're ranging, in New Zealand, they're about $6 per dispenser.
Some dispensers are valued at hundreds of dollars.
You can buy the little kid ones like Paw Patrol for about $3 each, but the ones that are like worth of value, they can get a nurse or a doctor and they're worth about $300 a piece. So they range from older programs like Mickey Mouse that are still long running to newer programs like Paw Patrol, Peppa Pig, but I do have like middle ground ones like Shrek, Winnie the Pooh, which is worth quite a bit of money, Ben 10, the Tweenies, it goes back to the Tweenies. Mr. Bean's very expensive as well. There's many different categories.
Miss O'Neill enjoys showing people her growing Pez museum.
Adults message them on the page and the little kids want to come look at them and I'm like, that's something cool and different to do in Dunedin.
In Dunedin for the South Today.
And that wraps up this edition of Southern Newsweek. For the latest news from across the southern region, head to www.odt.co.nz and follow Channel 39 on YouTube and Facebook. Ka kite anō.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.